Hello and welcome to another episode of EX Law, a podcast from Customer Experience Magazine, where we explore what it takes to build a better employee experience. I'm Becky Norman, I'm the EX editor at CXM, and in this episode, we're going to be exploring a really impressive culture transformation story from a UK manufacturing company called Verplas. And I am joined by Derren Gittins, the managing director of Verplas, who is here to share that story. But he's also here to give some guidance to those who are facing a similar struggle that Verplas did before they started to turn their culture around. Derren, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you, Becky. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's been a fantastic journey, really interesting. So Verplas is based on the south of England, 78 employees, and we manufacture ventilation ducting and fittings for ventilation systems.
And tell me a little bit more about yourself as well. How long have you been at Verplas? Where were you before? Be good to get a picture on that too.
Okay, originally engineering, worked at Pilkington Glass for 23 years, right through engineering, right to head of operations for UK, France, running a number of businesses, and then worked for a few private equity-backed businesses on business turnaround for many years, which was interesting, but tough, lots on culture change. And I joined Verplas in October 2020. So just been here 5.5 years.
Fantastic. And so let's dive into Verplas and that culture journey. It's quite a remarkable one. So in 2026, you are definitely officially an award-winning culture, which we will get to. But let's go back to that pre-pandemic period, so before you joined, when the culture at Verplas was very different from what it is now. Could you talk me through what it was like working at the company then? What problematic behaviours were showing up among employees and potentially leaders? And how was this impacting people in the business?
Yeah, I mean, massively. So when I joined the business, I used an external body called SOULS that we've used in the past to do a diagnostics. So this is an independent survey of around 25 people, very confidential, names are not taken. And the feedback from them was that this was the worst culture they'd seen in 35 years of doing that, which is really quite interesting. I joined in October. There was not really a management team in place. The people were kind of beaten up, struggling, but some good quality people that wanted the business to survive. But the environment was very toxic. You know, it was a really, really poor culture. So lots of challenges, lots of poor behavior, lots of bullying under this name called banter, which is actually not banter, it's bullying. Which we'll cover.
Wow. So I did not know that it was viewed as the worst culture that company had ever seen. Okay. So you joined and you had a very big task on your hands. Can you talk about that starting point for us? What were you thinking when you got those results through? What were you thinking? Where did you get started?
To be honest, I mean, I really love culture change and been involved in the past. So it didn't faze me. I just knew there was a lot of work to do. So it was really about trying to get some guidance. So the first thing I put together was a senior management team, which was really important, and grow those sort of people. But then it's about a vision. So what we did is get everyone together and describe where we want to go with the business. You know, we want to be the biggest, the best. We got all team members to write down what they would feel like and what would it look like if they achieved a business they'd want to be with. And instead of putting, whatever, they'll put in, smashing targets, fun place to be, supportive, just a great place to work. And that's became the basis of the strategy. And with that, then we came up with 5 guiding behaviours. And for each of those guiding behaviours, because I think there's a lot of businesses that have got vision, values and behaviours that put them on the wall, post them next to the lift. No one reads them, and then they wonder why the culture doesn't change. But we obviously did it very differently. So for each of those, behaviours. We did a we will, we won't. So there was 10 whiteboards across the factory and the offices, and each team would then put down what they will and won't for each one of those behaviours. And then we consolidated it into one script. Original wording, didn't change the words so people could recognise it, and fed it back, and people thought it was fantastic.
And you mentioned 5 behaviours there. Could you give us a flavour of some of those behaviours that you were aiming to integrate?
Yeah, so open, honest, two-way communication was a big one, because it felt before that the management didn't discuss anything with the team. They didn't give them any information. Everything was secret. And so in that we wills, it will be, we will communicate, we won't hide things, we will discuss things openly, all the financials, etc. So we can kind of live in the principle as opposed to just putting the principle on the board, if you like.
And were there any of those behaviours that you were setting out that you found were a lot easier to integrate, perhaps, versus some behaviours that were maybe a little bit more difficult, and you had to, for that behaviour change to be sustainable, you had to put a little bit more work into it?
Yeah, I think one of them, which is trust, respect, and support the team, was probably the most difficult, but the most rewarding. So this was really all about, at the start of the journey, we talked about banter is not acceptable in the workplace. And you can imagine a lot of people just sort of think, well, how do we communicate with each other? Because you see departments, having a pop at each other. And it's not about not making it a fun place, it's making it fair and supportive. It doesn't mean you can't criticize, it just means that you don't want to be pulling people apart. So when we set out the behaviours of we will and we won't with regards to supporting each other, all the management team said, it'd be easy for them because they can follow those behaviours. But in reality, the people on the shop floor was welcoming these behaviours, because you couldn't then just shout at them or tell them to just go and do it, or to get on with it. There was more respect. So from that point of view, it really started to crystallise the behaviours on the shop floor and through the management team. And I think in the 4 years, 21 people left the business, either voluntary, decided to leave, or were helped out the door because they just didn't want to come on board with the behaviours.
So that sends a really clear message there, because quite often you find in these toxic cultures, there might be high performers, but they are also the ones that have these problematic behaviours, and people let them slide because they are those high achievers. So, could you tell us a little bit more about that then? You obviously had people there that were unwilling to get behind those changes, but you were not going to let that slide.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, but essential for culture change. So you may have, as you say, a high-performing salesperson that's smashing all the targets, bringing sales in, but is very negative behind the scenes, is upsetting the rest of the sales team and the internal staff. And sometimes you've got to weigh up the amount of damage that's being caused by those actions, and you have to tackle it, and you have to risk having big grown-up conversations with people. And a lot of the time they don't understand the behaviours and they can change, or you got some people that basically say, that's the way I am, and don't want to come on board. And that's really, really important that those people have kind of moved out of the business. I think the interesting thing is, as the journey progresses, people start to self-manage themselves. So they start to go, well, shut up, Fred. We like it here. You keep moaning, you keep saying negative things. We think it's great, and we don't want to listen to your comments anymore. And that starts to become self-managing, which is great.
Yeah, that's a great sign that it's being well embedded, that culture change. Building trust is obviously a key priority with this, especially if there was this top-down kind of bullying culture originally. I'm sure a key part of that building trust was moving those problematic people out of the business if they were unwilling to change. Were there any other moves that you made to really build that trust among your people?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, it was a lot about communicating well on a regular basis, being approachable with the old management team. We had a monthly brief where I'd go through all the figures, good or bad, all the numbers. So we was being completely transparent, really open and honest. I had a monthly communications team meeting where 10 people from across all areas of business would come in and we'd have a what's on the grapevine sort of conversation. What are people worried about? Where are people filling the gaps? And that again created a lot of trust. And interestingly, in the early stages of the monthly briefs, where we bring everyone together, people wouldn't ask questions. So we had a question box that people would write the question down anonymously, or they could put the name on, put it in the box, and then I would open them live in the brief and give the answers. But just being really open and honest, and making sure that we all understand that we're equal in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that self-management piece that you mentioned just before, that's a clear moment to show that what you're doing is working. And I'm just wondering if there were any other moments like that where you really started to see the signs that your efforts were paying off.
Yeah, I think when we linked the customer element right through the business and the importance of everybody in that chain, really started to see some change, because people went from packing boxes to satisfying customers, to creating a good quality product, to becoming market leading, to be judged best in class by our customers. And so I think everyone started to feel a togetherness. And that's when people started to work better together, support each other more. We saw people moving between departments, and the team was really starting to get a sense that everyone was in it together. And again, it made sure the people that were pushing against it were kind of almost ostracized and kind of managed, which was great. So yeah, you could feel a real team spirit coming down. Yeah.
Yeah, the tables had turned. And you mentioned that that change in approach to a really impressive customer experience. Talk us through some of those outcomes from everything you've done in terms of the culture at Verplas for both the people and the business. What improvements have you seen?
Well, if we start just with the customer, because you mentioned that first, we went through Investors in Customers, which is an independent business that measures all types of businesses. Measures Net Promoter Score. It surveys the customers. It surveys 40% of employees as part of that. And we went from bronze, silver to gold in 3 years, retained gold. So that's great. We started with a Net Promoter Score of -2. So if you take the recommends and the not recommends and take one off each other, we were at -2. Last year we achieved 55, which is a really, really strong score. Obviously, we had internal employee measures as well, and each year we do a detailed survey that people would fill in honestly, openly, good comments, bad comments, and the questions in there: would you recommend us to a business? And again, we've taken a Net Promoter Score that was around -15, and we're up to now 46. And if you look at the scoring of satisfaction and engagement, they scored 87 and 88%, with 2/3 of the business scoring a 9 or a 10 in both those categories, which I think is quite an incredible achievement, really.
Yeah, truly exceptional.
And ultimately, we're a business. So as that transferred to profitability, yes. So we're now achieving the highest sales and the 40-year history of Verplas, the highest profitability, even though the business is in a challenging market. We're in new build housing, which is very, very slow at the moment. And we won CXA awards, obviously EXA awards now. We became, within Intertrade, our group, the number one for people engagement out of over 220 businesses globally, which was fantastic. So yeah, internal recognition, external recognition. And at the EXO Awards, as you probably know, we had people from shop floor and engineer, a forklift driver that were giving the stories, not just the management team. And again, it's giving that engagement of the people. So, culture's not about creating an environment that's pink and fluffy. It's about creating an environment where people feel valued, respected, and you get business performance.
Yes, absolutely. 100% agree.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about that external recognition now. So, that meaningful, sustainable culture change is really difficult to get right. And it started in 2020 and it's now 2026 and you're still seeing improvements. So that's really impressive. And it's led you to win awards, as you mentioned. So the UK Employee Experience Awards in particular for 2 years running. So Best Company Culture in 2025. And this year you won 3 silver awards for Best Employee-Centric Company, Best Change Management, and Best Employee-Driven Business Change. Really impressive. What do you think has brought you that success? What stood out about your journey?
So I think being really employee-centric is key. So I've worked in culture chains in the past where it's very top down. So you write the vision, you write the values, you write the we wills, we won't. Then you tell people that's what we're doing, and you get a level of success, but you don't get that real ownership. What we did here at Verplas was to say, actually, the whole team, you start to write where we want to be, the business we want to be. I even asked the management team or the senior management team to sort of not interfere too much, so people would then feel part of it. They could own it and see it. And over the years, it's become a real fundamental part. Our behaviours and we won't are posted in the factory in huge posters. And they use sometimes, if somebody makes a comment, they'll just go look at the poster or point to it, sort of to say that's not really in line with who we are. But I think the biggest benefit we've seen is in the last 12 months, we've actually taken out or redeployed all of the team leaders. So we have a super flat structure now. So myself, the management team, which is there's only 8 of us in total, and then there's the production manager part of that team, but then the teams are self-managed. So out of each of the departments, they don't have a team leader. They work together. And I think in the past, if there was a problem in packaging, they would speak to the team leader. The team leader would go march across to the office. It would then turn into an heated debate to whose fault it was. And then that would come back. But now, with no team leader in place, they just have that conversation. We allowed the teams to design their own area, to paint their own area. They do their own planning on a daily basis, as long as we know what they need to achieve. They'll subdivide the tasks of who's doing what. And I can honestly say not one single person has come and asked for a pay rise because they're taking on more responsibilities. They're absolutely loving it. And I think that's a really great indication. So the business runs itself now, which is great.
Fantastic. I was in the room when you won those awards this year. I saw you go up on stage with your team and you could really feel the energy coming from you, the passion from you, and then all the employees up there. And there was quite a big group of you really getting behind you. And you could see that it really meant a lot to everyone. So it does genuinely feel like that employee-centric culture. I don't think that's something that you can fake when you go up on stage and you accept an award. But I also think, being on that journey, you're not going to get everything right along the way. It is tough successfully managing, steering culture in the direction that you want it to go in. Are there any lessons that you learned along the way that you could impart on those that are perhaps at that starting point or around that starting point that you were at back in 2020?
I think there's a couple of things. One would be an outside evaluation. So listening genuinely to what the customers say and what your team members say is hurtful at first, but it's really, really important. And often people don't ask the question because they don't really want to know. And if it's the MD asking the question and he's the problem or she's the problem, then people can avoid it. So you need to be brave about this. Secondly, I think that you've got to deal with the negative people quicker. So I was probably too tolerant, and there were still people 3 years down the line that were still trying to remold, and in the end realised it wasn't going to work for either of us. So probably being a little less tolerant, but the success, the feeling around this place. Last Friday we had a summer party because it was 40 years old, this business. And it was people were all in, and we had a fantastic time. People absolutely love it, and they feel safe. They feel they can just be themselves. And I think, I walk around the business, I just feel proud, really proud of the people. And I think, at the EXA Awards, as you say, we had a big team there because we went in 3 categories, and 3 different people in each of those categories presented. And some of those, as I said, were like fork truck drivers, electrician, just people that were pushing their comfort zone, doing presentations for the first time. And I think that's why it comes through as passionate.
Thank you for sharing that guidance. I'm sure that'll be really helpful for organisations that are going through a similar thing. On the same kind of note, so Glassdoor ratings are increasingly important for recruiting great talent. Do you have any specific tips around that, how employers can go about improving their rating?
Well, obviously, the first thing you've got to do is to make sure the culture is genuinely good. I mean, I don't think you could tell your team members to put good comments on if the culture is not good. So getting it right is important. We did see a lot of negative comments in the early stages, and they're now being replaced with very positive comments, which is really good. And people do look at it. We did have somebody recently that came for an interview and said we looked on Glassdoor. We could see there's been a massive change in the business. And with our interview process, we always go through the culture and the values first before we talk about the job. This person wasn't successful, good candidate. And they actually left a Glassdoor rating for us to say, what a great business, what a great interview. Shame I didn't get the job, which I thought was quite interesting.
Wow, so that's really impressive if an unsuccessful candidate even went out of their way to provide you a comment on Glassdoor. What do you think it was that you did during that recruitment process to generate them to produce that comment?
I think it's because it's about the culture from the second they came in. They commented how friendly people were. They weren't just left at reception. Several people checked on them to make sure they're okay, offered them a drink, etc. In the interview process themselves, the conversation for the first half an hour was on culture. It was on our values. It was on our principles. It was all about getting the right fit of the individual before we talk about the skills element. And that the skills element, we could train, we could do things to help them. And I think they realized this was all about getting the right person and the right culture. And I think they was quite impressed with that. During the walk round, they commented there was lots of smiley faces, lots of friendly people, and they could see people with their head up, smiling, helping each other. And we do see that a lot from when we have, a service engineer on site or a training provider on site or a visitor from an office. The comments always, wow, you can feel it when you walk around. And I think, even though they were unsuccessful, they felt they had to make that comment, which I thought was fantastic.
And what are your plans moving forward? Are you looking to just kind of keep stable where you're at in terms of your culture and the employee experience, or do you have more plans to grow and improve?
Well, I would say the first thing is that, the market's pretty depressed at the moment. So we're in a position where we're just stable. We're super efficient. We're very productive, and we, just riding the storm. We are looking to introduce some new product lines later this year, which should give us some good growth. And the market's going to come back. We're only building a small number of houses in the UK compared to what we need. So I think we've got the rocket. It's aligned. It's fueled up. And currently cruising. I think when the market picks up, this is going to take off and be incredible. We are looking at probably renewing the culture values next year. Because we've had, obviously, since they were put together, we've had a number of turnover of team members. So we want to just refresh them. So I don't think it'll be thrown in the bin, but it might say, well, what is our next vision? What is the 2030 vision? So we go again, but based on the really good foundation we've built.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good after a few years to check in, and if you've got new employees coming in, to see they'll have new ideas to throw into the mix, I'm sure. Fantastic. Well, just one more question from me, and this is one that I'm asking every guest. We're living through so much turmoil, change, and uncertainty right now, and quite a lot of organisations are struggling to support their people through that uncertainty. What's the one thing leaders consistently get wrong about supporting employees during major change?
I think not being open and honest with the situation, often just hiding the numbers or hiding the problem because they feel that people are just going to get panic and leave. I think being really honest of where you're going, what process you're doing, and although you can't give them certainty, they can be part of the process. And I tell you what's been really interesting to give them certainty and to help our position is we introduced a business improvement scheme where team members put in a improvement suggestion, and then 50% of the savings go to the bonus pot that everybody gets, including myself, the same amount, and 50% goes to the profitability of the business. In the last 3.5 years, that's generated 1.2 million. So that is giving us a lot more certainty because it's helping the profitability of the business. And by people being involved, they feel part of that. So they're not panicking. They're saying, we can make a difference. And that's the difference. If people are, chatting in the corridor and thinking, oh no, we're in trouble, they're wasting time, being inefficient. If everyone's going, what can we do to improve every single day and can see the results? And that's brilliant. So that's how we go about doing it. Be honest and get people involved.
That's all the questions I have for you, apart from one final one. If there's just one takeaway that you want to give to a leader who is going through a similar situation to what Verplas was a couple of years ago, what would you like to share with them?
So a common would say do it because it is really good for everybody. I feel very proud of what we have achieved as a team. I think it's been life-changing for lots of people that have grown and developed, some of which have left, which is fine. The personal satisfaction that I get, the management team get, everyone around the business, the love and support for each other is really rewarding. So it isn't easy. It does hurt when you hear some of the comments from the customers and the team members, but it is worth it, both from a business performance and from a life-changing, rewarding way.
Derren, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to learn more about yourself and Verplas's journey. And really wish you all the best for your continued efforts into 2027, and hopefully see you back at the UK Employee Experience Awards in 2027.
Yes, hopefully. I'm sure we'll be there, bigger and better.
Thank you, Derren.
All right, thank you very much.